In the shadows of the great river, where the water runs the color of steeped tea and the bamboo palms whisper like restless spirits, there lived a man named Akon Obo. Now, listen closely, for this is not the tale of a lucky fisherman you think you know. This is a story of the rot that hides inside gold, and the darkness that waits when a man forgets the soil he sprang from. Akon Obo began with nothing but the calluses on his palms. In those days, the river was a silent god, and men did not yet know the trickery of iron hooks. Akon was so poor that the ribs of his children counted the days between meals. Desperate, he turned to the bamboo palm, weaving traps with a fevered intensity, his fingers bleeding as he stripped the fiber. He discovered a secret. The big fish, the ancient ones that lurked in the deep pools, had a craving for the oily sweetness of palm nuts. He set his traps at twilight, and by dawn the river surrendered its silver. Money began to flow like the tide. Akon married Eyong, a woman whose beauty was only matched by her silence. They had 3 sons, Ode, the eldest, who had his father's eyes, Yambi, the middle, who had his father's greed, and Atuk, the youngest, who had his mother's heart. As the boys grew, they didn't just help their father fish, they helped him hoard. Akon's heart, once soft with the humility of the poor, began to harden into a pebble. He bought slaves to do the work he once did. He paid his way into the sacred Egbo society, donning the leopard skin of a chief. But the river does not like to be cheated. The river remembers the man who once begged it for a single minnow. The betrayal began in the quiet of the home. As Akon grew older, his wealth became a mountain that his sons wished to climb, or, more accurately, a mountain they wished to inherit. Ode and Yambi grew weary of the old man's rules. They watched him count his brass rods and manillas, their eyes burning with a hunger that palm nuts could never satisfy. They began to whisper. They told their father the river was calling him, that the biggest fish of all, the great ancestor fish, was waiting in the midstream. One afternoon, under a sky the color of a bruised plum, the air turned heavy. A tornado was brewing, the kind that rips the breath from your lungs. Ode and Yambi urged their father into his small dugout canoe, claiming they had seen a massive shadow in the water. Atuk, the youngest, begged them to stop, sensing the malice in the wind, but his brothers pushed the old man out. As the first gust hit, the canoe bucked. Akon Obo looked back at the shore and saw his 2 eldest sons standing perfectly still, watching. They didn't reach for a paddle. They didn't call for help. When the canoe capsized and the gray water swallowed the chief, the brothers shared a look, not of grief, but of relief. But death is not an ending in the bush. It is a transformation. The brothers feigned a great sorrow that would have fooled the gods themselves. They wailed so loudly the birds took flight. After 2 days, the river spat Akon's body back out, bloated and pale, his eyes wide open as if staring at something behind the veil. They brought him back to the town and began a funeral so lavish it bordered on madness. For 12 days, the drums never stopped. Palm wine flowed until the streets smelled of fermentation and sweat. They were spending their father's gold to buy the town's silence and admiration. Then came the darkness. To honor a chief of the Egbo, the old laws demanded a sacrifice. They took 2 slaves, men who had served Akon faithfully, and led them to a hollowed-out cavern deep in the earth. The sons watched as the slaves were bound. One was given a native palm oil lamp, its flame flickering like a dying soul. The other was given a matchet. "Guard our father," Ode commanded, his voice cold. "Keep him company in the dark until the Great Spirit claims you both." They sealed the cavern with heavy stones and mud, ignoring the muffled screams from within. That night, the luck of the fisherman turned into a curse. As the chiefs played Egbo for 7 days, spending the last of Akon's fortune on masks and rituals, Atuk, the youngest son, began to hear things. He heard the sound of bamboo scraping against stone. He heard the wet, slapping sound of fish scales on the floor of their hut. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't see his own reflection. He saw his father's bloated face, dripping river water. On the 7th night, the cavern did not stay silent. Deep beneath the earth, the 2 slaves had died of starvation, but they did not die alone. The greed of the sons had offended the river spirits. In the pitch black of the tomb, the dead chief had risen, not as a man, but as a nightmare. The slaves' spirits, twisted by their cruel end, fused with the anger of the drowned father. The village was woken by a sound like 1,000 breaking traps. The stones of the cavern didn't just move, they exploded. Ode and Yambi were found the next morning. They weren't just dead, they had been caught. Their bodies were discovered in the very bamboo traps their father had invented, their limbs twisted and broken to fit inside the narrow frames. Their mouths were stuffed with the same palm nuts Akon had used as bait. They had become the catch of the day for a fisherman who had returned from the deep. Atuk was spared, but he was left with nothing. The wealth was gone, vanished as if it had been made of mist. The other chiefs, realizing the horror that had been unleashed, stripped the family of their titles. They called Akon the Lucky Fisherman, not in honor, but in a biting, terrified irony, for he was the only man who had ever managed to take his vengeance and his victims back into the water with him. To this day, when the tornado winds howl across the river and the bamboo palms creak, the elders tell the young ones to stay away from the pools at night. For Akon, Obo is still weaving. He is still setting his traps. And he is no longer looking for fish. He is looking for those who are consumed by the same greed that drowned his soul. He is waiting for the next lucky man to walk too close to the water's edge.